Many mother-in-law problems arise from the mother-in-law being too harsh on her daughter-in-law. But there are also cases where the mother-in-law is nice, and it's the daughter-in-law who is tough. My name is Emily. Lately, I've been worried about my skin getting dry and have been lost in choosing skincare products, just a regular housewife in her 40s. My husband, Mike, and I just celebrated our 15th anniversary, and while we have our small misunderstandings, we've maintained a peaceful relationship without major conflicts. Our daughter, Lily, just started middle school this spring and is enthusiastic about extracurricular activities. She's in her rebellious phase, using rough language and often retreating to her room, but I know she's a kind-hearted and considerate kid at heart. So my husband and I quietly keep an eye on her. Our son, Alex, is a 9-year-old who loves video games. He used to get sick often until kindergarten, but now he goes to school in short sleeves even in winter. In such a typical family, I've been living quite happily. However, since the kids need less attention now, I increased my part-time work hours, which unexpectedly took a toll on my energy, leading to me often resorting to quick and easy meals, which is a bit of a concern. That's about all I have to worry about. My parents live far away, but my husband's parents are just a 20-minute drive away. So, since having children, we've often relied on my in-laws. My father-in-law was like a traditional, stubborn old man, but he was incredibly sweet to his grandchildren, always waiting with a lot of treats. My mother-in-law, who has been by his side, is calm but efficiently handles all the household chores, always busy and smiling. That's why I never hesitated to visit my in-laws, feeling grateful for how welcoming they are to my children. This routine continued for a while, but my father-in-law passed away 3 years ago. It was a peaceful funeral, following 2 years of illness, though tinged with sadness. Still, my mother-in-law and husband were quite down, so I did my best to support them. Who would take care of my mother-in-law now that she was alone? It was my brother-in-law, John, and his wife, Susan, who stepped up. In return, they wanted to inherit her house. Susan, who is passionate about education, wanted to live in the conveniently located in-laws' house near the station to send her daughter, Sarah, then 10 years old, to a private middle school. Honestly, I was worried that living under one roof as mother-in-law and daughter-in-law might cause stress, even though my mother-in-law is a nice person. But the decision was made between my husband and his brother, so I couldn't say much. After 1 month after funeral, John's family and my mother-in-law started living together in the family home. My prediction came true. 3 years later, the relationship between my mother-in-law and Susan had significantly deteriorated. I brought some apples from my parents for you. Oh, thank you so much. During a visit to the in-laws' house in late autumn, I handed my mother-in-law a paper bag filled with apples at the entrance. She peeked inside the bag with a smile. They smell fresh and delightful. I always look forward to them every year. I must call your mother to thank her. And my mom really loves the oranges you send, too. Ah, hearing that makes me happy and makes it worth sending them. She replied, covering her mouth with her hand and laughing elegantly. I can't laugh like that. I have a habit of laughing loudly with my mouth wide open and clapping my hands, so I admire her refined demeanor. Now that the kids are older and I'm busy with part-time work and house chores. It's been since the last family reunion in summer that I've seen my mother-in-law. I really wanted to catch up with her, share news about the kids' growth and our life, but there's one person who always interrupts. Hey, can you not talk at the front door? It's disturbing the neighbors. Emily, if you're done, please leave quickly. Susan. That's Susan, my sister-in-law. She just pops her head out from the living room, frowning, not bothering to hide her displeasure. Okay. Sorry about that, Emily. We'll enjoy the apples. No, it's okay. My mother-in-law, looking apologetic, quietly closes the door. I could only stand there, holding back what I wanted to say, as the door shut. Susan's still so cold to her. It's heartbreaking to watch. It is. I vent to my husband, Mike, about what happened at the in-laws when he comes home at night. He lets out a big sigh, seeming troubled. Yes, what happened today wasn't unusual. In the first 6 months of living together, Susan seemed to be holding back and didn't clash with my mother-in-law. But last year, when Susan's daughter, Sarah, started getting serious about her exams, Susan began to be harsher with my mother-in-law. I've even seen Sarah, stressed out, taking her frustrations out on her grandmother. While all this happens, my brother-in-law, John, pretends not to see it and keeps himself busy with overtime and working weekends. I thought Susan might calm down after Sarah successfully got into her first-choice middle school this spring. But now, with no more commuting to tutoring sessions, Susan's been spending more time at home and treating my mother-in-law like an unwanted presence. Mother-in-law is also a caring person, so living with her may be troublesome in some ways. But treating her like that is just too much. I guess so. Mike becomes even quieter than usual whenever the topic of his family comes up. He probably finds it hard to speak ill of his brother and sister-in-law, who are, after all, taking care of his mother. Yes, I'm worried about mother-in-law, but if we get involved, it might make her situation worse. So after talking about the in-laws, we usually just end up sighing. But things took a sudden turn. Well, maybe it was all part of John and Susan's plan. One weekend, John unexpectedly said he wanted to talk and came over to our house. I had a bad feeling about it, but I ushered the kids into their room and led John to the living room. I was about to leave to give them space to talk, but John asked me to stay, so I sat down with them. John, looking clearly troubled, began to speak solemnly. "You've noticed that Susan and Mom don't get along, right?" "Well, I guess." My husband and I respond vaguely. "It doesn't seem like just not getting along. It looks more like Susan is unilaterally mistreating my mother-in-law." John, oblivious to our reactions, nods as if satisfied. "It's causing a lot of stress for Susan." "Is that so?" "Really? I think mother-in-law looks way more stressed. I'm her husband, so I want to prioritize Susan's needs." "I see. That's nice. Protecting your wife like that, you're a wonderful husband, aren't you? But it seems like you've been running away from the problem until now." So I decided to ask my mom to leave the house. "What?" My husband and I couldn't help but shout in unison at my brother-in-law's unbelievable statement. Kicking out mother-in-law? Not them moving out? No way, no way. Why does she have to leave? Even my usually calm husband raised his voice in anger. Despite being pushed by his reaction, my brother-in-law stubbornly continued with his selfish reasoning. "Well, it can't be helped. Susan is crying, saying she can't live with mother-in-law anymore. Then why don't you guys move out?" "That's impossible. Do you know how much it costs for our daughter's private school tuition? Private schools are really expensive. It's obvious that private schools are costly. Didn't you plan for that when you decided on middle school entrance exams?" "Well, but Susan insists that without private middle school, our daughter won't get into a good university." "That's all your own convenience. It's no reason for mother-in-law to have to leave her home." What an unplanned couple they are. I'm just stunned next to my furious husband. But then, my brother-in-law dropped a bombshell. "But, you know, the house is in my name." The heated atmosphere froze in an instant. "Wasn't that under the condition that you'd take care of mother-in-law?" My husband asked, his voice shaking with tension. As if he had played his trump card and was safe now, my brother-in-law answered with a half-smile. "It was, but you know, situations change. Ideals and reality are different. Why are you treating this like it's none of your business?" "Can't help it. Susan likes the house and doesn't want to leave. We need the money for our daughter's university, after all." So he did have a plan. From the beginning, he intended to kick out mother-in-law if things didn't go well. In fact, I feel like Susan had been plotting this from the start. "You're the worst." I threw my words at him, filled with all the disdain I could muster. With a strangely twisted smile and cold eyes, he looked down on me. "Mike and Emily, if you tried living with her, you'd understand. But I wouldn't recommend it. Don't try to push her onto us. Though, I'd appreciate it if you could help with finding an apartment and the move." After that devilish brother-in-law left, our house felt like a wake. The kids, sensing something was wrong, unusually offered to help wash the dishes and even shared their chocolate, trying to comfort us in their own way. Feeling both grateful and guilty for their kindness, I continued to ponder about mother-in-law's future. 3 days later, for the first time in our life together, Mike bowed his head to me. I already knew why. We've been a couple for so many years, after all. Emily. I know it's a lot to ask, but... Yes. I want to take my mom into our home. Okay. John and Susan may be terrible, but we don't know their situation. Maybe mom had some faults too. But I can't abandon her after being thrown out like this. I'll do anything. So? I heard you. Eh? As he looked up, I showed him a sly smile. You'll do anything, right? Yes. For a lifetime? Lifetime. My husband hesitated, his eyes wandering. That he didn't hastily agree shows his sincere character. Mike, making promises you can't keep is just like what your brother did. You're right, sorry. So, let's promise only what we can do, together with mother-in-law. I smiled at him, meeting his eyes. He crumpled his face and thanked me repeatedly. Emily. Thank you, really, thank you. I've also received a lot of help from mother-in-law. Now it's our turn. There's no guarantee everything will go smoothly. But I liked my mother-in-law enough not to leave her out in the cold. A month after we made up our minds, my husband and I went to pick her up. You're noble, aren't you? Sucking up to someone who can't give you anything in return. I'll never forget the whisper in my ear from Susan as we were leaving. When mother-in-law arrived at our house, she stood anxiously at the entrance. She looked even smaller, and I wanted to reassure her with kind words. But what we needed for a long and peaceful life together wasn't just kindness for the moment. Please take your time unpacking. Let's have some tea in the living room. Then, we'll have a family meeting. A family meeting. We're going to set family rules. So we can live as a family. Yes, I decided to establish family rules when welcoming my mother-in-law. It wouldn't be just me making the decisions. We'd discuss and agree as a family. Of course, if all we do is make demands, we will fall apart, so just the things we can't compromise on. Everyone seemed hesitant at first, but they were surprisingly willing, perhaps because they realized their wishes could be fulfilled. No entering each other's rooms without permission. My daughter's request, no entering each other's rooms without permission, was approved on the condition that she clean her own room. Don't eat food with someone else's name on it. My request led to a wry smile from my husband, who had a history of eating my pudding without permission. 10 hours of gaming per day. My son's wishful proposal was immediately rejected with a, "When will you sleep?" Finally, I turned to mother-in-law. I'll prepare it, so I'd like everyone to gather at the table for breakfast on weekends. Her humble request was unanimously approved. After establishing a few more rules, our life with mother-in-law began. Still, my heart was full of anxiety. But soon, I realized my worries were unnecessary. It seemed mother-in-law and our home were a good match. Because she was like a magician. When I returned from my part-time job, the house was cleaned, and the laundry was neatly folded. Just helping with the dinner preparations she had prepped during the day resulted in a quick and delicious meal. The planters and pots that were overgrown with mysterious plants were now blooming with round flowers of gomphrena. Her work was so elegant and vibrant. "Can you use magic?" To my silly question, she charmingly smiled, putting her finger to her lips and whispered, "It's a secret." Even the relationships I was most worried about were not a problem. In fact, we became calmer than before. Apparently, listening to the children's opinions when setting the rules was a good move. My teenage daughter, who was difficult to handle, shared her grievances, and my carefree son learned the importance of following rules. Though we only had meetings every 3 months, we held emergency meetings whenever there was unbearable dissatisfaction. Discussing thoroughly as a family. It was a relief when mother-in-law gently stepped in when my husband and I went a bit too far with our words. Thanks to her, our home became a place where we could better understand each other, more so than before she arrived. Additionally, mother-in-law's decision of having breakfast together on weekends proved to be very effective. She prepared wonderful breakfasts with baking bread. Even the kids, who usually struggled to get up on weekends, started waking up for the rules and the delicious food. Gradually, our daughter began to join in baking bread, and our son started early morning runs with my husband. Eventually, we even began gathering for breakfast on weekdays, which naturally increased our conversations with the kids. There were other changes too, but in any case, living with mother-in-law turned out to be a positive thing for us. Of course, we still care about each other, and there are times when we are confused by the difference in values. But I was relaxed enough to think that we should take time to understand each other. I thought that with mother-in-laws moving in with us, both families had found peace. But it seems things aren't going well at my brother-in-law's family. At first, they enjoyed the freedom without mother-in-law, and my brother-in-law started coming straight home from work, not caught between his wife and mother. However, about 3 months later, things started to look grim. First, the daughter's school and commuting fees became a heavier financial burden than expected. Susan, who hadn't worked for 13 years since giving birth, apparently struggled after starting a part-time job. Their sizable house with a large yard required a lot of time and effort for maintenance. Overwhelmed with her part-time job, Susan couldn't manage the housework, and both inside and outside of the house became neglected. At the same time, their daughter Sarah seemed to be going through a rough time. Apparently, she never wanted to go to a private middle school in the first place. Convinced by Susan, she reluctantly took the entrance exams. Still, the fact that she passed shows she really is a smart kid. But it must have been quite tough for her, traveling an hour each way to a school where she knew no one, and being forced to study relentlessly. And when her grades dropped or she skipped studying, her mother, who only scolded her, and her father, who just followed her mother's lead, made her realize the kindness of her grandmother, who always cared for her well-being and made her late-night snacks. It's a pity she didn't realize it sooner, but she's just a child. Now, Sarah resents her parents for driving her grandmother away and treats them harshly. My brother-in-law and his wife are having a hard time dealing with it. That's why, can you return mom to us? I was utterly appalled by my brother-in-law's words, who relayed the dire situation of his family and his wife's unbelievable request like a messenger pigeon. What do you mean that's why? My husband's face, filled with anger and disbelief, was expressionless. I probably had the same look on my face. We're in trouble. Without mom, Susan can't continue her part-time job, and we can't pay her tuition. You took the house from mom for that reason. You can do the housework instead. I'm too busy for that. Really? You're so busy working but still struggling to pay the rent? How low is your salary, John? Well, that is. Indeed, he always seems to be talking about money despite claiming to work so hard. In my mind, puzzled by this, I picture my sister-in-law, Susan, with her designer bags and frequent trips to the spa. It seems like my brother-in-law, John, is trying to keep her happy with money. Such foolishness. Our commotion at the front door made mother-in-law come out from the living room. We told her to stay away, but obviously, she was concerned about her own situation. Mike. What are you doing? Mother-in-law's face was just as expressionless. Still, John cheerfully called out to her. Mom. You heard it, right? You want to return to your house too, right? Susan seems to have reflected on her actions, so forgive her. And where is this repentant daughter-in-law? Well. So Susan has no intention of apologizing herself, but she wants the convenient housekeeper back. How utterly self-serving and dependent are they as a couple? I won't return. And I certainly won't lend any money either. Mom. Even my usually affable mother-in-law's cold gaze made John visibly shaken. Frankly, we were shocked by his naivety in expecting a positive response from her. But, don't you feel sorry for Sarah? She's been lonely since you left, and her smiles have diminished. She might even quit the school she worked so hard to get into. That's something you parents should handle. It's your thoughtless actions that caused this. You never considered Sarah's feelings. But, still. Using your own child as a bargaining chip is just despicable. Ugh. John finally seemed to realize the unassailable truth in her words. It wasn't that they abandoned my mother-in-law. It was that she had abandoned them. Go home. Neither Sarah nor I are convenient tools for your use. John, rejected firmly by his usually kind mother, left with a soulless expression on his face. As we returned to the living room, praising my mother-in-law's decision, our 3 children looked up at us anxiously. Lily, Alex, and John's daughter, Sarah. "Grandma, I'm sorry. It's because of my parents." Sarah looked like she was about to cry, and it was heartbreaking. Holding Sarah's hand affectionately, my mother-in-law smiled. "It's not your fault, Sarah. And you did apologize to me properly, remember? Now, let's continue with our work." The girls resumed processing the green plums, comforting Sarah with gentle pats on her back. A few months ago, Sarah had made the effort to come to our house, taking multiple trains, and apologized to my mother-in-law. Trembling but firm in her own words, she bravely owned up to her mistakes. She was far more mature than her parents. Of course, my mother-in-law accepted her apology, and Sarah began to visit our home occasionally, helping out. So, Sarah wasn't going to be used as a pawn in her parents' dirty dealings. Feeling a sense of vindication inside, I realized I still had a long way to go before I could be as gracious as my mother-in-law. 10 years later. My daughter is now a working professional, and my son is enjoying life as a college student. They're not in high-paying jobs or attending prestigious universities, nothing like that. But they both chose their own paths and continue to work hard to achieve their goals, which makes me extremely proud as a parent. John's daughter, Sarah, continued in high school through internal progression, but against her parents' strong opposition. She chose to attend a vocational school. It seems she realized what she really wanted to do while spending time with her grandmother. She supplemented her tuition with part-time work and scholarships, and after graduating, she got a job in a company far enough away to require flying to get there. Despite not having to pay for Sarah's education after high school, John and Susan's finances seemed to be in dire straits. Apparently, Sarah not growing up as they wished caused Susan considerable stress. She indulged in shopping as a way to relieve stress, but neglected house chores. Their home, once tidy when the grandmother lived there, became so cluttered that things spilled outside, making them the talk of the neighborhood. The unrepentant John and Susan periodically begged for help from mother-in-law and our family, but of course, we never accepted. Susan never showed up herself, always sending John alone like a messenger pigeon. They have to reap what they sowed. Now, with the children gone, my mother-in-law and I maintain a comfortable distance while still enjoying life together. My husband seems to be ever grateful to me, cherishing me even as we celebrate our 25th anniversary. To outsiders, our days might seem ordinary, but I'm incredibly happy with a family that's vibrant and full of life.